Welcome back to Second Helping, the show of choice for fans and followers of the number one league in all of collegiate athletics, the Southeastern Conference. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, alongside my great friend and co-host Brent Beaird, longtime college football analyst for First Coast News in Jacksonville, Florida. Brent, of course, also a voter for the most prestigious individual honor in collegiate athletics, the Heisman Trophy. And Brent, no shortage of topics on this Friday, March the 15th, 2024. I mean, we got a weekend of college hoops. We got a weekend of some spring football in the SEC. Be a disservice, though, if we didn't start with hoops up there in Nashville. It is a quarterfinal Friday on tap. And, man, when you look at these four games, pretty much playing out the chalk in terms of seeding, and with that, it has an NCAA tournament feel, a second round feel in some ways to a lot of these games up there in Nash Vegas.
It's as good of a lineup as we've seen on a Friday in quite a while. The SEC trying Trav, to get 7 in if they can. I mean, I know Texas A&M looks like they're on the bubble. They got a big win in their first round game, so that helped them a good bit. But look, this league right now is almost second to none, frankly. The way I know Big 12, I get that, but the SEC at this point, I mean, when you look at Bama and Auburn and South Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Florida, Trav, we could get half that group, in that Sweet 16 round, possibly, couldn't we?
Yeah, if you just talk about seeding right now for the NCAA tournament and you looked at it from that perspective of top 16 seeds, Tennessee, Auburn, Kentucky, Alabama, Florida, all in that mix. And look, we know in some other leagues, the slogan for the SEC, it just means more. Well, maybe basketball still does mean more in the ACC and perhaps the Big Ten, but they're not playing it any better in those leagues. No doubt about that. And yeah, you look at these potential semifinal matchups. If it goes to chalk, you could have Tennessee, Auburn in a semi on Saturday. You could have Kentucky, Alabama in a semi. And even if it isn't Kentucky, Alabama, Florida's been playing great over the second half of the season. Kentucky may be the one team in all of college basketball right now that no team wants to see in the postseason. Tennessee is the regular season champ. Great season for Rick Barnes' team. But, boy, seeing Kentucky go into Knoxville on the final regular season Saturday and do what they did with Tennessee, that was very impressive. And maybe Cal probably should knock on wood here, because when you say this typically about Cal and Kentucky, we get what happened last year. Kentucky looks like a team that very much, along with Tennessee, has that Elite Eight sort of feel about it.
And Cal said, didn't he, Trav? Wait till March. We're not good right now when he said that in February, but we think we'll be ready to go in March. And look, you follow this like I do. I mean, there was a talk, Trav, in February.
That he wasn't going to make it to March, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure Cal was imploring everyone to wait till March.
Probably.
Because a lot of folks in his own fan base, I think, didn't want him to see March.
Yeah.
I think they were ready for him to go sometime in February. But an exciting weekend in Nashville with men's hoops. We anxiously await the big dance coming up in just a week's time, but also a lot of football to talk about. And could it be, Brent, we're already in line for a spring game in Como? The Missouri Tigers, Eli Drinkwitz, coming off a very impressive 2023 campaign. Expectations are high for this Missouri team. Return Brady Cook. Got to find some replacements at that running back position. I know the Tigers have gone to the transfer portal in that regard for a couple of Sun Belt standouts that are perhaps going to team up to committee that situation. But maybe even more importantly, defensively, the losses that you've had there in terms of staff, bringing Corey Batoon as the new defensive coordinator. a lot of intrigue about this Missouri team, even if it is mid-March.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, Blake Baker, who they're missing, the former D coordinator, is going to LSU. And Trav, I thought that was pretty interesting strategy. Not much said about it, but Drew Pine, the former Notre Dame and Arizona,
well-traveled.
Yes. Saying that he is committed. Now, I'm reading between the lines here. Pine 8-2 as a starter, 4-1 against top 25 teams. Trav, is Eli Drinkwith expecting Brady Cook to head to the NFL and maybe Pine to take over next year?
Yeah, I guess there's some things to consider there. Brady Cook, too, he's a guy that they utilize in the run game. So you have some injury concerns potentially there. He's not afraid to sell it out for the team. So, I think Pine, what he represents is a nice insurance policy there at the position. Not dynamic. Previous stops at Notre Dame and Arizona State, there were some flashes of some good things, but I think he brings a sense of security there. He brings a little Chase Daniel is who he kind of reminds me of, the old Missouri quarterback. Chase Daniel, man, what a run as a NFL backup. Talk about piling up the checks.
Really?
And
big numbers. The greatest insurance of all Missouri right now is Luther Burden, is it not?
Yeah. Anthony Weiss. I mean, they've got a couple of guys. And, I think, again, when you look at the running back position, you're losing a first-team All-American in Cody Schrader.
Right.
You're thinking Marcus Carroll coming in from Georgia State. This guy rushed for over 1,300 yards last season. First-team All-Sun Belt. Nate Noel coming in from Appalachian State. So that should have been an attractive situation to running backs. After you saw what that offense did a year ago, it should have been no shortage of candidates that were submitting resumes for that job in Como. So defensively, Batoon, it's interesting with him too, Brent, because he comes from South Alabama.
That's right.
So you've got the defensive coordinator from South Alabama going to the SEC in Batoon, and the head coach from South Alabama, Kane Womack, going to Alabama as the defensive coordinator. And those two teams are going to get together around mid-season, I believe it is, in October's what could be a defining matchup between the Tigers and Crimson Tide at Bryant-Denny Stadium.
Very, very interesting. And look, again, this Missouri team, we don't have divisions anymore, but they're expected to come near double-digit wins again. Travis, is anybody? I'm still amazed at what Eli has done over the last. I give him credit. The last 2 or 3 years. I know you mentioned this a couple of times last year. They gave him that extension and raise when some of them wanted to run him out of town. But I think at this point, he's pretty well locked in there. And frankly, his name comes up every time a big name coach leaves.
Yeah, they got the extension and the raise in a season in which it wasn't great. Now, the previous AD was instrumental in that move. She has since moved on to Arizona.
Right.
She looks exceptionally intelligent at this point for that move. Now, the basketball hire, Missouri's coming off an offer in SEC play. So we'll see how that sort of plays out next year and beyond. But it's an exciting time in Como. And you talk about it in relation to SEC win totals. It's that time of year. We like to get into the win totals that Vegas provides us with in the offseason. And you look at Missouri sitting there at 9.5 and you think, wow, that feels a little bit high, because I think even Alabama's 9.5.
Yeah.
But Missouri's schedule, I think, sets up pretty nicely for a year in which Oklahoma and Texas are coming into the league. I don't think Missouri can have many complaints without its 2024 schedule shook out, and especially the month of November. If Missouri can get to November at, say, 5-2, 6-2, something like that, they'll have a chance, I think, to hit the over maybe even before the postseason.
Oh, yeah. and we'll have time to get into this and can't wait to do it. But you mentioned the Alabama game. They've got a 50-50 trap with Texas A&M. So a lot of that's going to determine about how they do. But you and I haven't seen this much excitement for Missouri football in quite a while.
Well, look at this opening stretch. Murray State in Como, Buffalo in Como, Boston College in Como, Vanderbilt in Como. That's your first 4 games in late August, September. I mean,
yeah,
you can't help but start 4-0, I would think, from that stretch.
No,
how about Bill O'Brien going to Como with Boston College on September the 14th? And then, as you said, you get into Texas A&M. Yeah, you go on the road the next weekend, but you know where you're going? You're going to UMass. I think you'll be okay. You get Auburn in Como. You do go to Alabama in late October. That certainly won't be easy. But as I talked about, November, Oklahoma in Como, South Carolina in Como, Mississippi State on the road, Arkansas in Como. Yeah. It looks to me like a 4-0 start is very doable, and a 4-0 finish is very doable.
Well, and listen, the thing that's about that schedule, if they are up for a real possibility for now the expanded 12-team playoff, Trav, could that schedule hurt them in front of the committee at some point?
It could, but it's still an SEC schedule.
Yeah.
Now the non-con, that non-con's rough.
It is.
BC kind of looks okay on paper, but otherwise, that's a rough look from the non-conference perspective. Yes. Hey, any other of these SEC win totals of note that maybe you wanted to get into? It sort of lines up in some ways too. You got a couple of the more prominent coaches in the league, and Sam Pittman and Billy Napier very much on the hot seat at their current places of employment. And it looks like the expectation or the number in terms of win total is about the same for both those.
Yeah, I would agree. Florida at 5.5. Boy, they're sure hoping that's around 7. I still think they start 4-1 or 5-0 along that time. And Hugh Freeze 7.5. That they've got at Georgia, at Missouri, and at Alabama. So that's not going to be easy for Hugh by any stretch of the imagination. But look, something you mentioned and I'm not saying that would necessarily be a firing, but South Carolina at 5.5, Arkansas at 5.5. And again, Bobby Petrino coming in to help with that Arkansas situation. But if some of these schools are at 5.5, Florida, South Carolina, and Arkansas, Trev, that could be an uncomfortable November for those coaching staffs.
Which of those 5.5s would you choose to go over that number? Would you feel most comfortable in saying between Florida, Arkansas, and South Carolina, this one of the 3, I like to go over 5.5?
Yeah, I would almost go with Florida with that, because they've got a they've got a doable opening in those first 5 games.
Let's say it's brutal.
Yeah. Let's say they go 5-0. For the rest of that 7-game schedule. I mean, Trev, can they win 2 more games? I'm just wondering, with some of those 50-50 games, if this staff is better this year, particularly defensively, they may get to 6, and with some good fortune this year, maybe 7.
I like Florida for the simple fact that I like the quarterback better than I do at Arkansas. Now,
no question.
Arkansas went to the portal. Bobby Petrino coming in there can be a quarterback whisperer, as we know. So, that could end up being a real positive for Arkansas. I think it has to be.
Yes.
For Arkansas to have any chance to get to the 5.5, because the schedules are pretty much similar, right? Especially when you look at Florida and Arkansas. Arkansas's got no treat when it comes to a schedule. So I like Graham Mertz. If I'm going to pick a sort of deciding factor in those 3 teams, and understanding South Carolina's situation right now behind center, I know Rocket Sanders is coming in. That's great, but you still got to have high-level quarterback play
No question.
To win 6 in this upcoming SEC
Oh,
with
yeah.
what's about to play out here. So I like Graham Mertz and the Gators of those 3 to go over the 6.5. And these non-conference games are going to be so big in all of this.
Really?
We think about Texas A&M. I look at A&M, and a game we haven't really even talked about from the non-conference perspective for the Aggies is Notre Dame.
Yeah.
In College Station.
Absolutely.
And then I believe A&M the next week goes to Florida to open SEC play. I mean, these opening stretches in general are going to set the tone for a lot of what's to come. And you talked about Florida. I think it's doable early, but they got to go out and do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there's going to be some major improvement, as we said, defensively. And look, you mentioned the quarterback at Florida situation. If they can bring Lagway along, that obviously the number 1 player in the nation in a lot of recruiting analyst case, that could really help them too. And look, you're talking about non-con games, Trev. 2 that really stick out for me: LSU and USC, and Vegas and Texas going to Michigan. And look, I know Michigan's lost a lot of players, but they've still got some pretty good depth there. Boy, some of the non-con early games are going to be incredible.
Michigan, in terms of college football brands, gets as good of a 1-2 punch in Ann Arbor as just about you'll ever see. Michigan gets Texas, and then the next week USC comes to Ann Arbor. And USC, as you said, gets LSU in Vegas on September the 1st. Yeah. I believe that's a Sunday or Monday game.
Yeah, I think it's a Sunday, yes.
Sunday night affair out in I got family ties to that one. So
that's right.
Fight on, if you know what I'm saying here. Yeah, I mean, you do. You have these early stretches, man, that if you don't get out, it's kind of like golf. If you open with a double bogey on the first hole and everyone else is going to kind of come flying out of the gates and making birdies, and let's say you double, the guy you're playing with, the gal you're playing with makes a birdie and you're 3 back after 1 hole. Yeah, some of those deficits are going to feel larger than others. Hey, Brent, we talked about this last week and it didn't take long, right? The expanded college football playoff is coming. Not just the expanded playoff that we're getting starting this year. We've got an expanded college football playoff that now we talked about getting the money right. And it sounds like maybe that's what's happening here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Trev, look, as far as they were concerned, if the money didn't get right, there were going to be some major changes at that point. There are some articles out over the last 24 hours talking about that if the SEC and the Big Ten didn't get their basically 30% each, that they were leaving the table and they were not coming back. So the ACC was 17%, that Big 12 with 15%, G5 with 9%, and then you're independent with the remainder, including Notre Dame, although Notre Dame will be fine. But look, you and I both know what's coming to the ACC. Florida State's leaving soon, and some of their other brethren that are going to be doing that. But is it safe to say the SEC and the Big Ten basically drew the line in the sand, Trav, and no one walked over it either?
Yeah, like we said a week or so ago, it's the SEC and Big Ten's world now.
Yes.
Everybody else just gets to participate, and they'll take what they can get and happily pocket that.
Yes.
And keep it moving, because there's always sort of that outlier, that potential for the Big Two to say, you know what, we're just going to go do our own thing.
Yes.
We'll just add a couple more brands of significance to each league, and we'll just play this thing off between ourselves, which would be a real shame in the grand scheme of things. I don't think any of us who have grown up and who love the sport of college football ever want to see that happen. But I don't think you can totally discount it as a possibility at some point down the road
No.
either. Something else we talked about last week, Brent, how Nick Saban just continues to move the needle. And it played out once again up in DC here in the last few days as Nick Saban discussed in detail some of the things that are transpiring within the sport that played a large role in his decision. And not just, as we learned, his decision, but when Miss Terry kind of says,
yeah, right.
Because Miss Terry, going back to 2006, late 2006, was actually a driving force in getting Nick Saban to go back to college football. I've said this before. I feel like for Nick Saban, this started to feel too much like the Dolphins all over again.
Yeah.
This was pro football. And part of what he loved about going to college football, or the many things that he loved about going back to college football or made it attractive to him, they weren't really in play to him anymore. This was essentially the minor leagues for the NFL. And in some form or fashion, college football has always been a bit of a farm system, as we know.
Yeah.
But the dynamics involved, the team dynamic, the individual development, team development, all those things for not just Nick Saban, but for his partner in all this, Terry Saban, had pretty much gone out the window.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, and look, if people don't believe that Nick Saban does not depend on Terry for some honest opinion, our mutual friend Chase Goodbread wrote this years ago, said that they had an agreement that basically Nick dealt with everything with football and she dealt with everything else. Look, what she did for that football program, though, a lot of people probably will never know, but she was a driving force in a lot of ways and probably will never get the credit for what she actually did. I know Saban was criticized, but look, Saban's climbed the ladder. That's what people who are criticizing him need to understand. I mean, he started at the bottom and he worked his way up the ladder, and he certainly deserved his money. And I will say to anybody, for what he did to the city of Tuscaloosa in the state of Alabama, you can't put a price tag on. But Trav, one thing you and I, and you certainly covered it on a daily basis, is Saban is not against a lot of things that people think he is. I mean, he's for revenue sharing. He's for the players getting value for what they do. Now, what he struggles with are players going to 3 or 4 different schools, not getting developed, not getting their degree, and plugging into some professional network type that would help them. So I still say some of his best work, Trav is ahead of him as far as him helping the game of college football.
Yeah, it's still a little bit early in this whole retirement thing for him. So I think it's somewhat understandable that he hasn't been able to get granular in terms of suggestions or a roadmap to sort of get this thing back between the ditches. He has said what a lot of folks have said. Under the current setup, it's hard to imagine this situation sustaining itself.
Really?
I don't have a beef with that. He has absolutely been paid handsomely by the University of Alabama. But to your point, if you still don't think the University of Alabama had the best deal going for the last 17 years, you don't understand how his impact transcended football or even athletics at the University of Alabama. And I think what ESPN is about to find out is that they're getting a similar deal, because what all of this has reaffirmed for us the last week or two, whether it was the ESPN article with Chris Lowe or the trip to DC, is that, again, I said this last week, no one in the SEC, no one in college football will move the needle during the upcoming season as much as Nick Saban, whether it's SportsCenter hits, whether it's College Game Day, whatever he says, whenever he says it, Brent, about anything is going to spike. That needle's just going to go. He's going to blow it up. He's going to blow up your social media. It's going to be the biggest value a network like ESPN that really needs values right now.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Because we talk about revenue sharing, we talk about all this stuff for the players, and it's funny how we don't talk about ESPN writing checks for $1 billion.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I'm a player and I'm thinking, you know what, I ought to be getting a cut of this. It doesn't start with, well, Nick Saban made $11 million. I mean, that's one of the things, but that's a byproduct of $8 billion.
Yes,
that the network is willing to pay for the college football playoff and just rights fees and things like that. And if I'm ESPN, Brent, we'll talk about this in a little bit. I'm not going to talk about it yet. I got a plan for Nick Saban coming up next month, but we'll get into that. Hey, let's talk about LSU offensively, because I know in making that transition from Jaden Daniels to Garrett Nussmeier, we anticipate some differences, not only in the style of play between those two, but even with what you're looking to replace at wide receiver, what you're looking to replace at running back. Not that Jaden Daniels wasn't the kind of dynamic talent that couldn't lift all the boats around him, because he absolutely could. It may be more on Garrett Nussmeier to do that in 2024 than it was on Jaden Daniels a year ago, again, based on the supporting cast that Garrett Nussmeier is going to have to work with.
Yeah, I agree with that. And look, they're going to be able to run the ball too. Josh Williams, tailback, Caleb Jackson, Caden Durham, some names that people may not know yet, but they will soon. And look, people can make fun of Brian Kelly all they want to. The biggest thing, and I've said this repeatedly on segments, is that Kelly did, Trav, and give him credit for realizing this. I mean, you and I could have done a better job in that secondary last year than what they did. It was absolutely abysmal, but they went out and got Blake Baker. They got Corey Raymond from Florida, and they got Bo Davis, who you and I both think are the best defensive line coach anywhere. So not only with this, and Trev, if this offense is anywhere near, and I know they've got the different participants in it, anywhere near last year, and this defense is improved, we could see a little bit of the old LSU that you and I grew up with.
It sort of has that feel to it based on Kelly's comments. And again, kind of considering the skill sets for Jaden Daniels and then Garrett Nussmeier, you would think Garrett Nussmeier would be under center more than Daniels was. You would think there would be a lot less zone read and quarterback keep game with Garrett Nussmeier. We've heard Brian Kelly touch on that. Again, I go back to wide receiver. And then when you're talking specifically about the run game, I understand you bring back a veteran back, really old, dependable in a lot of ways, and the former walk-on. But Logan Diggs moves on to Ole Miss. It's just been kind of a weird offseason. You had some legal issues involving, I guess, Trey Holly. So there are some questions I still have for that run game. I think up front, LSU should be just fine. That's where you're probably best about the run game right now.
Look, the people already saying, Trev, they may have the best offensive line in the league.
Very good. Yeah, no doubt. I think it's going to be a good group. Hey, we talk about one of LSU's former Western Division rivals, still going to play, though, the Crimson Tide and LSU. Speaking of TV, you knew that was going to happen, right? Good news, speaking of TV, for Alabama fans. We often talk about the stream situation as it relates to spring games. For Kalen DeBoer's first spring game as Alabama head coach, it's going to be ESPN. Now, I think pretty much everything else, though, right?
It is.
It's going to be primarily back on the ESPN Plus platforms.
Correct.
But great news for those in the state of Alabama that aren't quite to that point, Brent, of cutting the old cord.
Yeah. And by the way, you may either have to go to Pop's house and help him on some of these ESPN Plus, or maybe, as you said a few months ago, maybe he's gotten better as far as the technology is concerned. But yeah, this is only one on. But look, you and I know what this is about, Trav, and you touched on it a few minutes ago with ESPN. If they can get you to fork over a little bit more cash to see some of these games, they're just fine with that.
They are. And as I said earlier, if I'm ESPN, Nick Saban's all in this broadcast.
No doubt.
We're getting that relationship going with, and by the way, I want Nick on the field in that commissioner status that he used to have as head coach. I want him on the field. I want him with Kalen DeBoer.
Yes.
You know, get Nick all up in this thing. If I'm paying what ESPN is paying in rights fees these days, but yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, Pops had his cataracts replaced here, or one of them.
Excellent.
He'll have another one done in a couple weeks. I don't know if he wants to put his eyes through much more Florida Gator football. Yeah. I think Pops might tell you it's the Gator football that's the reason why he had to have the cataracts replaced. I'm trying to watch that.
He was burning his years. Yeah, that's great. And
I don't know if his eye doctor will want him doing that.
Maybe not. Trevor, real quick, I'll tell you one thing caught my eye. Is Caleb Odom, all 6'5" of him, going from tight end to wide receiver. Now, again, he's a freshman, and we get that. But I tell you what, folks really, number one, Kalen DeBoer has proven he can recruit with Zamir Smith from Maryland and also Derek Smith, number 2 player in Alabama. And what this offense is going to look like, people are going to want to tune in. Now, he may dumb it down a bit, obviously not give anything away, but that's going to be a fun watch for this Bama offense this year.
I was out at the second practice a week or so ago before spring break. Alabama's on spring break this week. And I can tell you there's still a lot of talent on that football team. Now, we'll see how they come out of it once that second or that April portal window opens, because I think it's a bit myopic to believe that all of these guys are going to stay after spring practice, because there's a feeling out process that's involved, not just for the coaching staff with the players, but certainly with the players and the coaching staff. So, but offensively, totally agree. Caleb Odom, a very impressive dude. I think they've got some second-year guys too, like Jalen Hale, that have a chance to be really, really good in this offense. Running backs, Justice Haynes, Jam Miller, they got a very good quarterback room. They got to figure out offensive tackle. I mean, that's it for them on offense. They guard to guard, they're going to be fine. But those tackles, they've got to figure that out, especially with J.C. Latham moving on to the NFL, Caden Proctor transferring to Iowa. So not a team without questions, but if you thought that the talent went out the door with Nick Saban in terms of players, it did not. How about some news and notes for us from around the SEC, Brent, before we get out of here?
Yeah, always glad to do that. By the way, Trav, we think about Arkansas on offense. That defense is supposed to be better. By the way, I know you remember Landon Jackson, all 6'7", 282 of him. Yeah. He will be coming back. And Trav, when I remember about everybody in the SEC had trouble blocking Landon Jackson.
Alabama certainly had trouble blocking Landon Jackson. And, that's a defense that it kind of went unnoticed that the Razorbacks did improve last season on the defensive side of the ball. In 2022, gave up nearly 465 yards per game. In 2023, just 357. So Travis Williams, I believe, responsible for some of that improvement on the defensive side of the ball for Sam Pittman. A nice hire, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to mention this too. The Gator, they promoted Russ Callaway to co-offensive coordinator. People may be interested in this connection. I know you remember Neil Callaway,
his dad,
who is his dad. But Neil Callaway at longtime at Alabama and also at Georgia. UAB too.
He was at Georgia too.
That's right. He sure was. And
I think Auburn.
Yeah. He certainly has made the rounds. Jamarcus Western making a position change at Florida, moving to outside linebacker. Kirby and the boys. Trav started this Tuesday. Got a lot of them who went through, a lot who have left. Obviously, Marcus Rosemy, Jack Saint, Brock Bauer, Cedric Van Pran. But you know good well they've got folks behind them. Kirby talked a good bit about a lot of these guys who have had surgery and coming back. I know you caught this like I did. Here we were wondering about Carson Beck, Trav, before last year, if he would even be the quarterback. I mean, we thought he probably would, but I'm looking at the Heisman Trophy possibilities. You've got Ewers of Texas and Carson Beck of Georgia, the top two. That's pretty amazing, is it not?
It's going to be another good year for quarterbacks around college football, even with Jaden Daniels moving on and Caleb Williams and Drake May. And it's going to show up at the top of the upcoming NFL draft, the kind of quarterbacks the sport is losing. But these guys with still eligibility remaining, like the Dylan Gabriels and some of the others, that essentially probably made more money or did make more money by staying in school than turning pro. That's going to ensure that the quarterback play is going to sustain. And then you're also going to have some emerging guys like Jackson Arnold of Oklahoma, Jalen Milrose back at Alabama.
Nico.
I think Graham Mertz could be a surprise in all this.
Yes.
I'm not calling for a Joe Burrow year 2 at LSU. I'm not doing that. But I like that guy. And I think that he's got enough people around him. The familiarity should be there this season. If he can stay healthy, I think Graham Mertz can be a little bit of a sleeper. And I know Billy Napier is banking on that as well. Anything else, Brent?
Yeah, let me end with this. And I've got a couple of questions for you. And I'll be brief with this, but I think this is important. You and I have covered high school football for years. And living in the state of Florida, a lot of folks think Florida may have a lot of money for high school coaches in their stipend, but that is not the case because high school coaches, they line the field, they wash the jerseys. There's really nothing that they don't do. But there is a bill out from the legislature, and Adam Anderson, who is in the legislature from Palm Harbor, about offering $22,000 stipend for Florida high school coaches. And then it kind of goes down with some other basketball, softball, volleyball with that. Now, look, I'm not saying that they're going to get it. They expect some pushback from some of the other folks with teaching. But Trav, people don't understand, in Texas and Georgia, high school coaches often make 6 figures and get a truck, and they don't have to teach. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I know you and I have covered this for years. That really raised an eyebrow for me, and I don't know if this even gets off the ground. But for the high school coaches that you and I have followed and have a lot of respect for, I hope at least they get something out of this.
Yeah, it's been an exodus that's been going on for years in terms of top Florida coaches moving to Georgia, especially because the difference in compensation is light years. And you've got the big booster clubs in Georgia and some of the other states that are certainly able to augment the financial situation for not just the coach, but the program in general, facilities. You got indoor facilities, in Alabama and Georgia and some of those states. You go around some of the Jacksonville area high schools, they're just now getting field turf on their game fields. They've been playing on dirt, poorly lit stadiums. Forget about just even coach compensation. Just resources in general is brutal. You're seeing coaches, and hey, I don't blame them. They get their retirement in Alabama and then go over to Georgia and cash out.
Sure. Absolutely.
Why wouldn't you? But meanwhile, Florida is essentially become a black hole of sorts for quality coaches or coaches that could have hung around for long careers. Now, you've had your Corky Rogers, you've had your coaches that they're from an area, they're going to stay in that area. but they certainly, if they wanted to go, let's say 95 miles or 100 miles north to Valdosta, could have jumped on a situation like that, or a Lowndes up in the Valdosta area. So it's long overdue. It's thankless in so many ways. And so hopefully we see something along those lines, and not just for football coaches, by the way.
Yes.
Because the coaches that are trying to do it the right way, regardless of the sport, when you break it down to an hourly wage, they're not doing it. They're absolutely not doing it for the money in most places around the state of Florida.
No, Trev, I'll end with a couple of questions. We need a punt report for one, and two, I know you're doing some exciting things with YouTube on golf. Obviously, the TPC here. Trev, who wins with this weekend?
Well, I've already been able to watch a round in a little bit on this Friday morning, and Scotty Scheffler at last check wasn't in the lead, but that guy is just so solid. And you usually don't pick a repeat champion at the Players because it never happens.
That's right.
But he is just so solid, and he's putting a little bit better right now. So that's his bugaboo. If he putts even decently, he's going to be hard to beat. So give me Scotty in a repeat. As far as Pops, talked about it earlier, he had one of the cataracts replaced.
Yes.
And so he'll be looking forward to getting the second one done next week or in 2 weeks. I think it's a 2-week break you go through. So a little bit of a medical stretch here for Pops. He has also done a sleep test for his apnea.
Yes.
And when he apparently awoke, the attending RN or doctor or specialist or whatever asked him where he would like his CPAP mailed to. And Pop said, "You're not mailing me a CPAP. There's no way I'm sleeping with this thing on." So he declined the CPAP. He was informed that there was a real possibility that he could have a medical emergency in his sleep, to which he responded, "Dying in my sleep's always the way I wanted to go." So he's just, he said, "I can't think of a better way to go than in my sleep."
Well,
what are you going to tell a 76-year-old?
Nothing.
So no
and I'm
CPAP for Pops.
I'm sure he was a jewel to deal with. And the reason I say that is I've just gotten a CPAP.
Yeah.
I
know people love it.
Oh yeah. Well, but look, I had a situation with sleep apnea, and I really need to be around here for.
In all seriousness, it's not anything to play around with.
No, absolutely not. But look, it's also not a whole lot of fun to get. Look, there's more headgear for that than there is for a football game.
Yeah, he is. No, it's not C-Pops. It's CPAP.
Yeah, so I bet.
We won't be changing the name anytime soon for Pops. All right, Brent, as always, a lot of fun here on Second Helping, the show of choice for fans and followers of the #1 league in all of collegiate athletics, the Southeastern Conference. Look forward to doing it again real soon, my man.
Yep, me too, bud. And who knows what's going to happen by the time we have another one.
Who knows? Yeah, that's a long week coming up.
It is.
For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier, thanking you once again. Hey, follow the channel, like the channel, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our content as it drops right here. For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier, thanks again. Until next time, so long, everybody.